You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Teams do not achieve high performance by accident. They evolve through a series of stages, supported by enabling conditions and adaptive leadership. A clear purpose, the right people, bounded authority, and stable membership form the prerequisites for teamwork to flourish. Without these, even well-intentioned groups struggle to coordinate or sustain performance. For example, a team lacking authority to make product decisions will remain dependent on outside approvals, slowing progress and undermining ownership. Stable membership ensures relationships and shared norms have time to form, while a clear purpose focuses energy on outcomes that matter. On the exam, team development questions often test whether candidates can distinguish between foundational conditions and practices layered on top. The agile response usually emphasizes that performance grows from solid foundations, not shortcuts. Enabling conditions create the soil in which trust and collaboration can take root. Bruce Tuckman's model of team development provides a useful map of dynamics that most groups experience: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. These stages are not rigid checkpoints but recurring patterns, especially when membership changes. Forming is marked by orientation and polite caution. Storming introduces conflict as assumptions clash. Norming sees cohesion emerge as roles and norms stabilize. Performing reflects high trust and throughput, while adjourning addresses transitions as teams disband or reform. Leaders who understand this model set realistic expectations. Conflict is not failure but a natural stage. On the exam, Tuckman's stages often appear in scenario-based questions about conflict or cohesion. The agile response usually emphasizes that development is iterative. Teams revisit earlier stages under change, and leaders must adapt their stance accordingly. During the forming stage, the focus is on orientation and psychological safety. Team members often experience uncertainty about goals, roles, and expectations. Early signals of safety, such as leaders inviting candid input and peers listening respectfully, reduce anxiety. Initial working agreements, covering communication cadence, decision rules, and norms, create scaffolding that makes collaboration predictable. For example, clarifying that all backlog items require acceptance criteria before being pulled gives new teams a sense of structure. Without these agreements, ambiguity leads to hesitation or silent conflict. On the exam, forming stage scenarios often test whether candidates recognize the importance of safety and clarity at the start. The agile response usually emphasizes reducing ambiguity and investing in trust. Teams that begin with clear agreements and safe space accelerate their transition to deeper collaboration. The storming stage normalizes conflict as assumptions are tested and differences emerge. Far from being destructive, this stage is essential for surfacing perspectives that might otherwise remain hidden. Constructive facilitation prevents storming from devolving into gridlock. Decision rules and escalation paths help resolve disagreements quickly while preserving relationships. For example, a product owner may prefer prioritizing features by customer demand, while engineers advocate reducing technical debt. Without a framework for decision-making, this tension can fester. With clear practices, it becomes a productive dialogue about balancing outcomes and sustainability. On the exam, storming scenarios often test whether candidates interpret conflict as dysfunction or development. The agile response usually emphasizes that respectful challenge builds resilience, and that facilitation and transparent decision processes transform storming into a path toward cohesion. Norming represents the stage where cohesion begins to solidify. Roles become clearer, language is shared, and trust is built through keeping small commitments reliably. For example, if a team commits to completing 3 backlog items in a sprint and consistently delivers, confidence grows. Trust enables more open feedback, and collaboration deepens as members recognize each other's strengths. Rituals such as retrospectives reinforce cohesion by providing safe space for reflection. On the exam, norming scenarios often test whether candidates understand the importance of reliability in building trust. The agile response usually emphasizes incremental credibility. Teams earn confidence by delivering consistently and aligning on norms. Norming is the stage where a team transitions from a collection of individuals into a cohesive unit that can handle greater complexity. Performing reflects the stage where teams achieve true autonomy and high throughput. By now, trust is established and members collaborate seamlessly, often anticipating each other's needs. Feedback cycles are short, and mutual coaching is routine. For example, a developer may proactively pair with a tester to reduce defects, while product owners adjust backlog priorities based on emerging customer signals without delay. Performing teams sustain quality without heroics, balancing speed and resilience. Leadership becomes enabling rather than directive, focusing on removing systemic impediments rather than managing tasks. On the exam, performing scenarios often test whether candidates recognize autonomy as the hallmark of high performance. The agile response usually emphasizes that performing teams self-manage effectively, sustain predictable flow, and continually adapt without requiring heavy oversight. Reteaming and adjourning ensure that transitions do not erode progress. When members join or leave, teams often revisit earlier stages, requiring renewed agreements and redistribution of responsibilities. For example, adding a new tester may require revisiting definition of done to ensure alignment on quality practices. Adjourning occurs when missions conclude, requiring closure rituals to preserve knowledge and honor contributions. Without these processes, knowledge is lost and morale suffers. On the exam, reteaming and adjourning scenarios often test whether candidates recognize the cyclical nature of team development. The agile response usually emphasizes structured transitions that capture lessons, preserve knowledge, and maintain trust. Teams that navigate membership changes intentionally remain resilient, sustaining performance despite inevitable evolution. Role clarity and expectations protect teams from confusion and overlap. Explicitly defining ownership boundaries, collaboration interfaces, and decision authorities ensures that work is pulled by capability, not pushed by title. For example, engineers may own technical design decisions, while backlog prioritization remains with the product owner. Collaboration agreements clarify how these roles interact, preventing duplication or gaps. Without clarity, teams risk churn as decisions are revisited or work stalls due to uncertainty. On the exam, role clarity scenarios often test whether candidates can differentiate between responsibility and authority. The agile response usually emphasizes transparency and ownership, ensuring that collaboration flows smoothly. Clear roles do not restrict agility, they provide structure that supports autonomy and accountability. Skill matrices and cross-skilling plans enhance resilience by reducing bottlenecks and dependencies. A skill matrix identifies who has expertise in which areas, highlighting gaps and concentrations of risk. Cross-skilling plans pair members to broaden capabilities, ensuring that knowledge is not siloed. For example, pairing a senior developer with a junior teammate expands coverage and accelerates learning. Over time, resilience increases because multiple people can handle critical tasks. On the exam, skill gap scenarios often test whether candidates recognize the importance of cross-skilling. The agile response usually emphasizes proactive coverage of critical skills to reduce fragility. Skill development is not only an individual growth path, but also a risk reduction strategy that strengthens team reliability. Feedback culture accelerates individual and team growth by embedding timely, behavior-based exchanges into daily work. Instead of saving feedback for annual reviews, agile teams normalize frequent, constructive input. Recognition for positive contributions reinforces desired behaviors, while candid feedback about improvement areas supports growth. For example, a developer may thank a peer for clear documentation or suggest refining test coverage immediately after a sprint. This culture creates continuous alignment and improvement. On the exam, feedback scenarios often test whether candidates recognize the role of immediacy and specificity. The agile response usually emphasizes timely, actionable feedback delivered in safe, constructive ways. Feedback culture turns everyday moments into opportunities for learning and cohesion. Conflict competence ensures that disagreements improve decision quality rather than damage relationships. Teams develop skills in facilitation, reframing issues, and negotiating based on interests rather than positions. For example, a debate about tool choice can shift from entrenched advocacy to exploring underlying concerns, such as ease of use or integration. By managing conflict constructively, teams unlock creativity and resilience. On the exam, conflict competence scenarios often test whether candidates interpret conflict as a resource or a threat. The agile response usually emphasizes equipping teams with facilitation skills and shared agreements. Conflict handled well prevents groupthink and drives innovation, transforming differences into stronger outcomes. Psychological safety measurement provides an early warning system for cultural drift. Lightweight surveys, one-on-one conversations, and observation of behaviors, such as reluctance to admit mistakes, signal whether safety is at risk. For example, if members stop raising concerns in retrospectives, safety may be eroding. These signals allow interventions before silence undermines learning and quality. On the exam, safety measurement scenarios often test whether candidates can detect subtle cultural risks. The agile response usually emphasizes proactive measurement to maintain openness. Safety is not static. It must be monitored like any other performance indicator. Teams that measure safety protect their ability to experiment, learn, and adapt. Team health indicators extend beyond safety to include engagement levels, cycle time stability, and defect escape rates. These measures provide early warning when cohesion or performance begins to drift. For instance, increasing rework or fluctuating throughput may signal bottlenecks or cultural strain. Health indicators do not replace performance metrics but complement them, ensuring that teams remain balanced in well-being and delivery. On the exam, health indicator scenarios often test whether candidates understand the link between morale, flow, and quality. The agile response usually emphasizes using a few meaningful indicators to monitor health without overwhelming the team. Healthy teams sustain agility. Unhealthy ones may deliver temporarily but collapse under strain. Leadership stance evolves as teams develop. In early stages, leaders provide directive clarity, offering structure and reassurance. As capability and confidence grow, leaders shift to enabling, coaching, and removing systemic impediments. For example, in forming teams, leaders may set meeting cadences directly, while in performing teams, they step back to let members self-manage. Leadership maturity is measured by adaptability, knowing when to provide direction and when to trust autonomy. On the exam, leadership stance scenarios often test whether candidates can align leadership style with team maturity. The agile response usually emphasizes flexibility and support. Leadership that evolves with team growth enables durable high performance, reinforcing that agility is as much about people as it is about process. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Coaching and mentoring models accelerate team development by providing both systemic guidance and day-to-day support. External coaches help identify organizational impediments that teams cannot solve alone, such as governance bottlenecks or structural misalignments. Peer mentoring inside the team supports practice growth, where experienced members share skills with newer ones. For example, a coach may facilitate retrospectives to surface systemic issues, while a senior developer mentors a junior colleague in test-driven development. These complementary approaches ensure that learning occurs at both organizational and individual levels. On the exam, coaching scenarios often test whether candidates recognize the role of both external and internal development. The agile response usually emphasizes blending coaching and mentoring to build capacity. Teams grow stronger when guidance tackles both big-picture conditions and daily practices, enabling sustainable performance improvement over time. Pairing and mobbing practices take collaboration deeper by making work collective rather than isolated. Pair programming or test pairing enables two people to share context and reduce errors, while mob programming brings the entire team together on complex problems. These practices accelerate knowledge sharing, improve quality, and reduce concentration of risk in any one individual. For example, pairing developers spreads understanding of critical modules, ensuring resilience when someone is absent. Mobbing can resolve design challenges more quickly by harnessing diverse perspectives simultaneously. On the exam, collaboration practice scenarios often test whether candidates understand how pairing reduces bottlenecks and improves cohesion. The agile response usually emphasizes that while these practices may feel less efficient in the short term, they build capability, resilience, and quality that pay dividends in the long run. Retrospective discipline transforms observation into tangible improvement. High-performing teams do more than discuss issues. They prioritize experiments, assign owners, set due dates, and check whether changes worked. For example, if long code reviews delay flow, the team may experiment with pairing for critical paths, measure cycle time, and review results at the next retrospective. Without discipline, retrospectives risk becoming repetitive venting sessions. On the exam, retrospective scenarios often test whether candidates understand that action and follow-up are essential. The agile response usually emphasizes turning reflection into concrete, testable changes. Disciplined retrospectives embody inspect and adapt loops, ensuring teams continuously refine their practices. By embedding accountability into improvement, retrospectives move from ritual to a driver of real performance gains. Goal setting and accountability help teams stay outcome-focused. Instead of measuring progress by activity levels, teams align effort to goals with transparent dashboards and regular reviews. For instance, a dashboard might show throughput stability, defect trends, or customer adoption rates tied to team objectives. This visibility encourages honest learning and shared ownership. Accountability is not about blame, but about ensuring alignment and transparency. On the exam, goal-setting scenarios often test whether candidates understand the difference between activity metrics and outcome measures. The agile response usually emphasizes goals tied to value and results, not just effort. When teams see their goals clearly and hold themselves accountable to outcomes, they maintain motivation and direction, while fostering a culture of integrity and transparency. Sustainable pace policies preserve creativity and long-term throughput by protecting energy. Burnout is a hidden threat in agile environments where teams may push themselves to meet aggressive commitments. Sustainable pace means balancing workload, allowing recovery time, and setting realistic goals. For example, teams may monitor average working hours and reallocate tasks when spikes occur. Leaders must reinforce that working beyond capacity is not sustainable. On the exam, sustainable pace scenarios often test whether candidates recognize the false economy of overwork. The agile response usually emphasizes that reliable delivery depends on endurance, not heroics. Teams that protect energy, preserve quality, maintain morale, and foster continuous innovation. Sustainable pace ensures agility endures rather than collapsing under unsustainable strain. Diversity, equity, and inclusion practices expand problem-solving capacity by ensuring all voices are heard. Teams with diverse perspectives generate more creative solutions and avoid blind spots. Equity ensures that opportunities and responsibilities are distributed fairly, while inclusion ensures that every voice contributes meaningfully. For example, rotating facilitation roles prevents dominance by a few voices and signals that input from all members is valued. Psychological safety must extend to everyone, not just the majority. On the exam, DEI scenarios often test whether candidates can link inclusion to performance. The agile response usually emphasizes that diversity improves innovation and resilience, while exclusion reduces cohesion and trust. High-performing teams succeed not only because of technical practices, but because they cultivate inclusive cultures that enable full participation. Distributed teamwork adaptations are essential when co-location is not possible. Agile teams clarify handoffs, document decisions, and rely on shared artifacts to maintain cohesion. For example, decisions made in meetings are logged in visible tools so absent members stay aligned. Explicit agreements about response times and overlap hours reduce frustration. Without these adaptations, distributed teams risk misalignment, duplicated work, or hidden delays. On the exam, distributed team scenarios often test whether candidates can recognize the role of explicit practices. The Agile response usually emphasizes intentional adaptation, ensuring distributed collaboration matches the quality of co-located teams. Agility is not bound by geography. It is sustained by clarity, transparency, and inclusive practices that bridge distance. Tooling for collaboration reduces friction and supports flow. Shared backlogs, version-controlled code repositories, and standard communication channels provide common ground. Without consistent tools, teams waste time reconciling information across silos. For example, a single backlog tool visible to all roles ensures alignment, while shared code repositories reduce integration delays. Dashboards and chat tools support transparency and real-time coordination. On the exam, tooling scenarios often test whether candidates understand the importance of common systems. The Agile response usually emphasizes that tools are enablers of collaboration, not replacements for it. Good tooling standardizes access to knowledge and reduces context switching, enabling teams to focus on value creation rather than chasing information across fragmented systems. Recognition systems reinforce behaviors that create trust and reliability. By celebrating learning, experimentation, and cross-help, teams model the culture they want to sustain. Recognition does not have to be elaborate. It can be as simple as acknowledging contributions in retrospectives or team chats. For example, thanking a peer for mentoring or for taking on extra work to resolve a blocker reinforces collaboration. Recognition sustains morale and motivation, ensuring that positive behaviors are repeated. On the exam, recognition scenarios often test whether candidates understand the cultural levers of performance. The Agile response usually emphasizes consistent, visible appreciation for behaviors aligned with values. High-performing teams thrive on reinforcement that strengthens trust, engagement, and cultural cohesion. Anti-patterns and failure modes threaten team performance if left unaddressed. Hero culture rewards individuals who save crises but erodes teamwork and sustainability. Hidden cues obscure real workload, leading to bottlenecks. Meeting sprawl drains energy and leaves little time for focused work. These anti-patterns must be identified early and countered with explicit policies. For example, limiting meeting time or making cues visible prevents drift. On the exam, anti-pattern scenarios often test whether candidates can spot dysfunctional behaviors. The Agile response usually emphasizes vigilance and corrective action. Teams that actively manage anti-patterns sustain healthy flow, protect morale, and avoid waste. Anti-pattern awareness is part of continuous improvement and resilience. External dependencies often challenge team performance. Interfaces with other teams, vendors, or legacy systems introduce risks and delays. Managing dependencies requires interface contracts, defined service classes, and early integration checks. For example, a team integrating with a vendor API may define contract tests to detect issues early. Without proactive management, dependencies become late surprises that disrupt flow. On the exam, dependency scenarios often test whether candidates can identify risks in external alignment. The Agile response usually emphasizes transparency and early validation. Dependencies cannot always be eliminated, but they can be managed deliberately to preserve predictability. High-performing teams acknowledge external constraints and adapt proactively rather than waiting for them to cause disruption. Growth pathways connect team objectives to individual development. Teams thrive when personal learning goals align with product needs. For example, if a product requires advanced analytics, a developer's growth plan may include training in data science. This alignment creates motivation, as individual aspirations fuel collective progress. Career paths and product goals reinforce each other, reducing attrition and improving resilience. On the exam, growth scenarios often test whether candidates understand how individual development supports team performance. The agile response usually emphasizes aligning growth to both organizational strategy and personal goals. High-performing teams are not only delivering value but also developing people, ensuring that success is sustainable and rewarding at multiple levels. Measurement alignment prevents teams from being driven by vanity metrics. Selecting a few meaningful indicators, such as outcome achievement, flow stability, and quality trends, ensures focus remains on value. Vanity metrics, like raw task counts or hours logged, create false signals and encourage the wrong behavior. For example, measuring throughput without tracking defects can incentivize speed at the expense of quality. On the exam, measurement scenarios often test whether candidates can recognize the difference between meaningful and misleading metrics. The agile response usually emphasizes selecting metrics that align with principles of value and quality. Measurement alignment ensures that teams learn honestly, adapt constructively, and sustain credibility with stakeholders. Continuous improvement cadence ensures that teams evolve as challenges and contexts shift. Small, frequent adjustments prevent stagnation and embed adaptability into the culture. Retrospectives provide rhythm for change, but improvement can also be integrated into planning and daily practices. For example, a team may adopt a new testing tool after a defect spike, then evaluate its effect in the next cycle. Improvement cadence ensures that experimentation remains constant rather than sporadic. On the exam, improvement scenarios often test whether candidates understand the role of iteration in growth. The agile response usually emphasizes deliberate, incremental improvement. High-performing teams remain dynamic, embedding evolution into their DNA. Improvement is not occasional, it is continuous and cumulative. In conclusion, developing high-performing teams requires enabling conditions, deliberate practice, and adaptive leadership. Coaching, pairing, and retrospectives build capability, while sustainable pace and recognition systems preserve morale and resilience. Diversity and distributed adaptations ensure inclusion and cohesion, while tools and measurement keep collaboration transparent and focused. Anti-pattern vigilance, dependency management, and growth pathways reinforce durability. Continuous improvement ensures that teams evolve alongside context and challenges. On the exam, candidates will be tested on their ability to link practices to team maturity and resilience. In practice, high-performing teams are not born. They are developed through intentional design, continuous learning, and leadership that adapts as capability grows. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.